with us for Question the Truth, regardless of whether it is popular or unpopular. Our goal is to fiercely advocate for the truth on this program because we want a better society and better ourselves. We have 30 minutes each week to address the current and shocking state of affairs religiously, politically, and morally in America, a reality that is unimaginable and incomprehensible. We often ignore it, suppress it, or sanitize truth and facts. But the godless and rebellious in our society are costing us in more ways than you and I can imagine, much less quantify. But optimistically, I sense that there is a movement of what we might describe as the moral majority, actively advocating for the truth and to see our nation get back to God. In Psalm 33 and verse 12, the Bible reads, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Psalm 46 and verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." More on this, much more on this in our last segment today. We have many real and relevant topics on the program today and a few that are also raw. I bet I'll reference some events that several of my listeners will be hearing for the first time. I do plan to get to the events in Nashville and the outrage in Nashville regarding Mayor John Cooper. The citizens are questioning the truth and the validity of what they are being told. And I'm not going to hold back very much. It is personal when the government officials start playing politics with people's livelihoods. I will share indisputable facts and a detailed timetable that reveals the truth. Unfortunately, we know the truth. And we know the economic implications and the devastation to those 4,400 restaurants in Davidson County, the owners and the workers. It just has a ripple effect, as now the mayor is proposing a 34% property tax increase. And I will get to that segment later in this show. Now, as you will see with the stories today on oppression of churches, among other stories today, the macro problem across America is not just a push for bigger and bigger government, but for an increasingly authoritarian government. What's going on with this mayor, for example, is a microcosm of this larger issue. And here's what they do, folks. They use this seductive language to appeal to citizens about what the government's going to do for you. And they convince citizens to let them have their way and to just trust them. Now, I want to take the opportunity in this first episode to thank my friend Ashley Wells for his technical and audio support in the studio for Question the Truth. Thank you, Ashley, for all of your help behind the scenes with your expertise. For our listeners, I'm going to be upfront with you. If you choose to be a loyal listener, a loyal participant, and a loyal contributor to Question the Truth, you need to know and you need to understand I'm not here to coddle anyone. I'm definitely not here to worry about your feelings or to worry about who might be offended. I'm here to fiercely advocate for the truth. Nothing more, nothing less, and nothing else. Now, before I proceed with sharing examples of shocking things, let me give a disclaimer first. For some of you, I'm not going to state the truth forcefully enough. I'm not here to demonize nor dehumanize anyone, but I am going to speak truth and facts that you can be assured of. And unlike most podcasts that talk about faith and religion and or politics, I do not intend to be an echo chamber. I believe there are things happening the mainstream media does not share because of their propaganda. See, it's no longer news. It's powerful people with an agenda, and we could spend an entire show on that phenomena. But if I misquote someone out of context or misrepresent an event or a group, it's not intentional. Please email me at questionthetruth2020@gmail.com. That's questionthetruth2020@gmail.com and share your information with me and correct me. I'll listen to what you have to share. Secondly, as already stated, my intention is definitely not to demonize nor dehumanize anyone, but I am here to address the views and the statements of leaders and their platforms. And I'm also here to point us to God and to His truth and wisdom and insights in Scripture, as you'll hear in the last segment on this first show. Now, if I misquote the Bible, if I misunderstand another religion or misunderstand a current event, please correct me. I am not intolerant to other perspectives, and I want to learn and grow in knowledge and understanding every day. But don't underestimate me. We live in the information age, really the misinformation age. So I am well read, and I verify stories with multiple sources before jumping on a story. Here's a recent example. A millennial Christian friend of mine in his early 30s, he's highly intelligent, and herein lies a big part of the problem. What I'm going to share is Christians who advocate for state rights over natural rights. And I'll explain and I'll simplify the constitutional framers and natural rights. But let me give you the story first. I was sharing on my personal Facebook this summer about the happenings in California with churches and the fine, such as at Grace Community Church with longtime pastor John MacArthur. And I referenced a latest news story where the California government was harassing them and threatening to seize their property, in addition to, at that point, fining them more than $50,000, not counting whatever legal fees that there were for their legal counsel. I'd been following this story since the beginning of COVID-19 and how they complied for the first several months. Well, one of my own Christian friends, about 5 to 6 years younger than me, questioned the source, challenging if the event was even true. So guess what I did? I shared 3 more sources rapid fire, including one that he would accept, CNN. You know, they're the most trusted name in news, so they claim, showing more details. So then guess what he did? He did a hard pivot. That's right, he pivoted to saying, well, I'm okay with this happening because COVID-19, blah, blah, blah. So, 1/100th of 1% are testing positive in California. Not sick, not hospitalized, not dead. And you're okay 6 months after the 14-day flatten the curve effort, still having the government tell churches what they can, cannot, must, and must not do for a few hours on Sunday? You're okay with casinos, and I've read of strip clubs reopening, and you're okay with abortion clinics that are deemed essential. You're okay with casinos and other establishments having more rights to be open 7 days a week than a church to be open simply on Sunday? The constitutional framers believed in natural rights, that our rights derive from God, not government. And therefore they are inalienable. Inalienable means they cannot be taken away, nullified, nor transferred or given to another. We have certain natural rights to property, to liberty, and to life itself. The role of government is to recognize and secure these rights. However, progressives effectively reject the notion of natural rights, believing instead that our rights derive from the state, which underlies their efforts to make citizens more and more dependent upon government through their proposed policies. Therefore, our rights and our freedoms are being undermined as understood by the constitutional framers who sought to establish a government that maximizes personal liberties, not a government expansion and not government overreach. Now, here's a smaller illustration of this religiously. The end of September in Moscow, Idaho, about 75 Christians in their church parking lot were standing there. They were social distancing and they were singing hymns. And while worshiping God outdoors on their church property, police officers, due to no fault of their own, they were executing the directives that they had been given, but they started arresting these individual Christians. Now, the constitutional rights of churches are under attack. How ridiculous and unbelievable it is. Imagine if you go to a church building location, whether for a worship service or a wedding or a funeral, and you're not allowed to enter the property, and your preacher is arrested for defying a mayor or governor's order. This is the United States of America that fled religious tyranny to be free. Unthinkable and unacceptable. Friends, regardless of how we feel or think, there are shocking things happening like this that are affecting us, whether we address them or not. Things I'm sure those older than I never imagined that you would see. Ronald Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be sought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." Did you hear that? Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. So people will call me an alarmist. No, I still have tremendous faith in God and hope for the future. But I am a realist, acknowledging the facts about real issues and the current unimaginable and incomprehensible state of affairs. I will admit I've been disillusioned and desensitized to things happening, but I'm no longer going to pretend, and I refuse to stay silent. I've created videos and an entire YouTube channel to this endeavor, and now this Question the Truth initiative. And I solicit your help and ask you to join the mission of Question the Truth to fiercely advocate for the truth to better society. Not that it hasn't been crazy in the past, but this year there's been a plethora of things happening that if we aren't careful will become normalized and accepted. I mean, we're lacking morals and lacking common sense at an all-time high. I read plenty of social media posts, actually too many tweets on Twitter, and I engage in plenty of conversations, and I watch and listen to direct statements on video camera, and common sense has literally gone out the window. Now, for those of you that are just joining in, you are listening to Question the Truth with Brian Tips. You can tune in each Wednesday on WCDT Radio and connect throughout the week on Question the Truth Facebook page. We are on the radio each Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central Time, which can also be accessed at WCDTradio.com for listeners in and outside of the area. Each episode is also archived as a podcast that can be listened to anytime at WCDTradio.com. Now, I want to get to this one. I bet there are listeners right now that didn't even know this happened. In Charlotte, North Carolina, the end of August, there were protesters screaming, "F your Jesus chants," only they are saying the four-letter term. You can look it up on the YouTube clips. They're saying F your Jesus over and over as a chant. Now, how would you like to be walking down the street with your family and your children are hearing a large group chanting F your Jesus? You see, it's not just F the cops. Now it's F Jesus. This is out of control. I'm going to be upfront. I do intend to talk about God and the truth of His Word on every program and Jesus Christ, fully aware that speaking of Jesus is controversial. So if you're an atheist or of another religion other than Christianity, I'm not going to force my faith on you, but I must be true to myself and my values and faith convictions, and I invite you to listen. Today's program will finish with a segment entirely on faith and politics and former presidents and their ideology and their statements. Now, this next one, your question might be, well, which time are you talking about? Because unfortunately, this one has been happening a lot. Folks, when we saw it on college campuses, we should have been paying attention because now it is becoming a normal demonstration and gesture of disdain for America. I'm talking about in Portland, Oregon, a group of citizens organizing the burning of 2 American flags. I don't know about you, but it is impossible, let me repeat, impossible for me to view that and not to have strong emotions stir inside of me. Not just my family and friends who have sacrificed in the line of duty, but millions of Americans have not just put their lives on the line, but have paid the ultimate price, shedding their blood for these demonstrators to exercise their privilege, their liberal privilege to chant what they chant, to burn American flags in broad daylight. No shame, no decency. Facts. 750 million in the world are living in abject poverty, distress, civil unrest, and government oppression. And of that 750 million, according to a Gallup poll, 158 million worldwide would migrate to the United States of America if they could. The next 5 most desired locations combined total just 30 million. Canada, Germany, France, Australia, and the UK. All 5 together are still only a fraction of the interest in the U.S. America is the greatest country in the world. I am a proud American. By the way, Ashley, I thought Whoopi Goldberg 4 years ago threatened she was going to move to Canada. She must have changed her mind. Guess how many residents of the U.S. were born elsewhere? Pew Research, as of 2018, says it's 44.8 million residents. And there's 1 million immigrants that come to our country every year. So these celebrities that speak about leaving, they're not leaving the greatest country in the world. They're just saying that. Now, another story I bet some of my listeners didn't know happened. In Chicago, Illinois, back this summer, protesters were vandalizing a Ronald McDonald House, frightening those sick children, parents, and frightening the workers late at night. Ashley here in the studio says that's sick. These are young children with cancer. Where's the outrage? Why aren't the mainstream news media outlets covering this? They never covered it. Why weren't there any leaders, celebrities? Why weren't anybody speaking out against these acts of vandalism and lawlessness terrorizing a Ronald McDonald House? It was barely on any TV media outlet or newspaper coverage because it didn't fit their narrative or agenda. We become so desensitized, like it's normal, and we sanitize it. I did an entire Facebook and YouTube video sharing my perspective on this and also talking about abortion as an example, which we'll talk about abortion on Question the Truth in the future. Now, to the segment on Mayor Cooper in Nashville. The government has been oppressing business owners across this country during COVID-19, especially small business owners who are willing to implement the exact same social distancing measures as the larger businesses. And this is just one example of how our rights are diminishing. But let's go to Nashville. Back in June 30th, Nashville and Davidson County had a spike of 20,000 new positive COVID-19 tests. Thank God for Dennis Ferrier investigating and discovering the internal email communication so the public is not in the dark any longer. So they were looking at the contract tracing, and for example, out of the 20,000 cases, 1,200 were at construction sites. They didn't close those down. But in bars, there had been 19 new cases, and in restaurants that are not bars, only 3 cases. There was an attempt to say that there wasn't a cover-up and their public relations is trying to walk it back. But you can't go back and change what was said to the public on July 2nd on video, what the mayor said directly to the people. And on July the 2nd, the mayor indicates that the restaurants and bars are closing due to an increase in cases. On July 7th, the Tennessean runs an article slamming restaurants and bars for being the problem. That was the narrative. Just 3 COVID cases, not sick, not hospitalized, not dead, and they shut down the industry. 4,400 restaurants. When Dennis Ferrier got to speak at the conference, one of the many good points he made was, hey, you would think with all the negative news that this positive news would be something to celebrate with the community. Only 80 total cases since March, he said, and he said, let's stay the course with social distancing while enjoying a meal at a restaurant. Think with me. Citizens are already experiencing the pain and the heaviness of this virus, not just the health crisis, but an economic crisis. And they're emotional and fearful. But now you add to that pain the pain of knowing your local mayor was not transparent with the facts and with the numbers. Owners of these 4,400 businesses, all of those workers and their livelihoods are further jeopardized. It's personal. I lived in Nashville for 18 years, and this is affecting my friends. It is affecting livelihoods. Of course, the mayor is also now suggesting a 34% property tax increase. It affects every property owner. As there are more developments on this, we will cover them on Question the Truth. So you're listening to Question the Truth with Brian Tipps. Now, before moving into my final segment, I will briefly summarize how my convictions have evolved and ultimately crystallized in recent years, and especially my increasing affection for family values, faith in God, and the United States of America and constitutional freedoms. Family values, faith in God, valuing our country and constitutional freedoms are values as a child that were instilled in my household by my parents, values embodied and taught in the church I was raised in, and values embedded in the fabric of the country where I got the county where I got an education, played sports including high school basketball, and also met my future wife. These have all been a part of my ethos, identity, and heritage. Now, as you listen each week, you will be hearing often about these core values. I am forever grateful to my parents and the lessons and principles they have instilled in myself and my two younger brothers. These are the same values and a value system that I see eroding and evaporating in our society with consequential and too often catastrophic outcomes. Out of concern for coming across as self-righteous, clearly my family was not and is not perfect, and neither is yours or anyone else's since the beginning of time with Adam and Eve. I am not a Christian because I am better than anyone, but because I need Christ. And our society overall is becoming less and less godly, more and more ungodly, ungrateful, selfish, rebellious, antagonistic, lawless, and moralless. Now, to shift to the next gear, so to speak, please understand I am fully aware that words like conservative, progressive, and liberal are used in so many different contexts that their meaning varies from one person's use to another, and even whether they have positive or negative connotations. Now, having stated the obvious, in a moral, religious, and even political sense, I grew up conservatively and on the conservative side of the spectrum, though not as an extremist. However, whether good, bad, or indifferent, while we lived our values, we predominantly kept our thoughts, beliefs, political persuasions, and concerns to ourselves. Right or wrong, this is how many families, actually most families that I observed back then with Judeo-Christian values were: quiet, polite, and non-confrontational. We avoided confrontation. While at college, my core beliefs and values were tested. That's pretty normal in a university experience. I questioned many things as that age typically does, and I became stronger and more solidified in my ideas and positions. I also became more liberal in my thinking, which affected how I contributed to conversations, often as an antagonist, and how I engaged in politics and voting. However, having children of my own and observing the moral decadence in our society and the subtle and sometimes not so subtle erosion and evaporation of morals and values, God has been recalibrating my reference point back to a more conservative, moderate lane with convictions that have crystallized in the test of time and circumstance. Through the years, I've had coworkers and friends who were more conservative than me and those who are on the more progressive and liberal side of the spectrum. You know, it would be cult-like to isolate from anyone over religious and political views. That's part of the problem, lacking an ability and, dare I say, a willingness to engage in a civil conversation. Now, you might be wondering, after listening to most of this program, is Question the Truth a religious program, a political program, or a moral program? The simplest and direct answer is yes, all three. Whatever made us think these are mutually exclusive categories anyway. Now, I will share on Jesus and Scripture in each episode, but to conclude this one, let me share just a handful, a sampling of quotes from former presidents about the Bible. I'm calling this the grand finale. These presidents will be listed in sequential order. They're all significant and revealing statements, but I'm not going to reference George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln. I'm just going to give you a flavor from some former presidents and their perspectives of faith. And I'm going to go fast because we're running out of time. James Madison, we have staked the whole future of American civilization not on the power of government, far from it. We have staked the whole of our political institutions upon the capacity of mankind for self-government, upon the capacity of each and all of us to govern ourselves according to the commandments of God. The future and success of America is not in this Constitution, but in the laws of God upon which this Constitution is founded. James Madison, 4th President of the United States. John Quincy Adams, so great is my veneration for the Bible and so strong my belief that when duly read and meditated upon, it is of all the books in the world that which contributes most to make men good, wise, and happy. John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States. Andrew Jackson, that book, sir, is the rock on which our republic rests. Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States. Ulysses S. Grant, my advice to Sunday schools, no matter their denomination is, hold fast to the Bible as the sheet anchor of your liberties. Write its precepts in your heart and practice them in your lives. To the influence of this book, we are indebted for all the progress made in true civilization, and to this we must look as our guide in the future. Ulysses S. Grant, 18th President of the United States. Woodrow Wilson, the Bible is the one supreme source of revelation of the meaning of life, the nature of God, and spiritual nature and needs of men. It is the only guide of life which really leads the spirit in the way of peace and salvation. America was born a Christian nation. America was born to exemplify that devotion to the elements of righteousness which are derived from the revelations of Holy Scripture. Woodrow Wilson, 28th President of the United States. Calvin Coolidge, the strength of our country is the strength of its religious convictions. The foundations of our society and our government rest so much on the teachings of the Bible that it would be difficult to support them if faith in these teachings would cease to be practically universal in our country. Calvin Coolidge, 30th President of the United States. Franklin Roosevelt, two more. We cannot read the history of our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place the Bible has occupied in shaping the advances of the Republic. Where we have been the truest and most consistent in obeying its precepts, we have attained the greatest measure of contentment and prosperity. Franklin Roosevelt, 32nd President of the United States, and Harry Truman. The fundamental basis of this nation's laws was given to Moses on the Mount. The fundamental basis of our Bill of Rights comes from the teachings we get from Exodus and St. Matthew, from Isaiah and St. Paul. If we don't have a proper fundamental moral background, we will finally end up with a totalitarian government which does not believe in rights for anybody except the state. Harry Truman, 33rd President of the United States. Friends, we must have more people getting back to God and back to the Bible for their standard and guide. I used to teach some ethics classes in high school, and among many things I would underscore is while all of us as a society will not always come to the conclusion and choices as God would have us, if by a minimum we recognize God's authority, the authority of the Bible, by engaging in thoughtful and reflective processes, we will become a more ethically conscious society, a kinder society, and a more selfless society that cares about others. As we close this first broadcast, I leave you with the words of the Apostle Paul to those in Galatia from Galatians chapter 4 and verse 16. Have I now become your enemy because I tell you the truth?